and welcome back to End Times Prophecy News Update. Carrie Geren, Scoggins. Coming to you with the issue today of liberal Democrats attempting to bring UN-style anti-blaspheming laws into the United States. This would mimic the laws in the EU and within the United Nations that have signed on to the UN Global Court that make it illegal to speak against Muhammad or the Quran or Allah, their God. Notice that the anti-blaspheming laws in the UN does not protect the rights of Christians or Jews. One never hears of anyone arrested for speaking against the God of the Jews, the Bible, or Jesus Christ. Here in the United States, the Federal Supreme Court ruling that we have the legal right to debate the issues upheld in the Phelps ruling when the hate speech law was overturned inside the United States by the Federal Supreme Court. This ruling cited specifically our legal right to debate Islam, homosexuality, abortion, and any issue from a biblical viewpoint, and went on to cite our legal right to debate other religions. So not only by federal law currently do we have the legal right to debate the issues such as Islam, we have the legal right to debate other religions. This being the case, the Democrats' attempt to bring an anti-blaspheming law into the United States, which of course is in direct opposition to our First Amendment, also violates the Federal Supreme Court ruling, our legal right to debate the issues as upheld when the hate speech law was overturned in the Phelps ruling in the Federal Supreme Court. The federal law, created by Federal Supreme Court rulings, that court precedent, trumps all other legislation and law. Putting this type of unconstitutional legislation into check, checking the constitutionality of such attempts. Remembering the legal right to debate the issue is the legal right to argue, debate, and, of course, offend. Our legal right to oppose the state's viewpoint, our legal right to oppose other people's viewpoint, and not have state endorsement of their views, especially concerning a religious tenet such as those in the Quran. The legal right to debate other religions. Let's take overturning the hate speech law, upholding our legal right to debate the issues. That of the Phelps ruling, our legal right to debate Islam, homosexuality, abortion, and any issue from a biblical viewpoint, as well as our legal right to debate other religions. Noting that in the Federal Supreme Court hearing on this case, it was brought up the case in the Netherlands where a media writer had written in the newspaper that by today's standards, Muhammad would have been considered a pedophile. Quote, she was arrested for hate speech. For this statement, though backing it up with the fact that Muhammad had married a 6-year-old named Aisha, as stated in the Bukhari and the Quran, and that by today's standards, he would have been considered a pedophile by their nation's laws. The United Nations anti-blaspheming law and their hate speech laws censored speaking out against Muhammad, Islam, or the Quran. It took their legal right of debate, their legal right to expose other religions, and our federal Supreme Court found that, of course, this opposed our First Amendment rights. The United Nations does not have anything akin to our First Amendment. It is imperative that the citizens of the United States do understand this fact. Many of the Obama supporters did not understand the implications of Obama's attempt to sign us on to the global court system. The United States is now not signed on to the global court system. Therefore, we are not under UN law. Let me repeat that statement. The United States is not signed on to the global court system. Therefore, we are not under UN law. It was the Obama administration that had attempted to indeed sign us on to that global court system, putting us under UN law, which would usurp our constitutional civil rights. Why this is such a serious action is because the United Nations has nothing akin to our First Amendment. No freedom of religion, no freedom of the press, no freedom of speech, no separation of church and state, keeping the state out of the church, preventing Bible censorship, and no laws preventing state endorsement. In other words, their government enforcing a religion, such as Islam. And the UN has no legal right of protest. They can arrest you for protesting their laws in the UN. Our federal Supreme Court cited these facts concerning the United Nations and how they oppose our constitutional law here in the United States. That though the United Nations has a constitution, it's very vague and arbitrary. And looking at the facts, one notes that they have absolutely no intentions of mirroring our constitutional civil rights, especially our First Amendment. When the federal Supreme Court upheld our legal right to debate the issue in the Phelps ruling, overturning the hate speech law in the federal Supreme Court, they stated our legal right to debate Islam, homosexuality, and abortion, specifically because in the United Nations, it's illegal to speak against Islam. It's illegal to speak against homosexuality, and it's illegal now to even protest from a pro-life viewpoint. Few have noted that the United Nations has made protesting against abortion illegal for those that have signed on to the global court system. That's unheard of by most in the United States. They can't fathom the state coming in and arresting them for speaking out against the government or their legal system. Our school system has failed to teach our youth that the United Nations is a Marxist police state. You rarely hear that statement, and you rarely hear the facts that back it up. Note the transcripts of the Phelps ruling, where they overturned the hate speech law and upheld our legal right to debate the issues. to cite my sources. It is imperative that the Christian community grasp the weight and the magnitude of the importance of the Phelps ruling in the federal Supreme Court. They're overturning the hate speech law and what it means for freedom in the United States. If we didn't have the legal right to debate Islam, think of how many converts they would gain had they been able to hide the truth about their belief system and what goes on in their country. For instance, the liberal media never mentions the over 40 million black slaves owned in Muslim nations. My End Times Prophecy News Update, Carrie Geren Scoggins webcast. Islam's racism, over 40 million black slaves owned in Muslim nations, Carrie Geren Scoggins, is where I cover this topic more in depth. And another video, Islam ran the slave trade and still does today, Carrie Geren Scoggins. I wanted to make mention that few have told Muhammad's writings in support of African slavery, not that of other races, just African slavery, and that he owned almost 100 black slaves himself. Moving on, such as the case in the Netherlands, where the writer had stated in the newspaper that by today's standards Muhammad would have been a pedophile. She was referring to that in the Bukhari 62:88. The Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old. And this is also mentioned in the Quran. And it is well known that Muhammad admitting to groping Aisha, the 6-year-old child, and not having penetration until she was age 9. Again, both in the Bukhari and the Quran. This is why child brides are still legal in Muslim nations. The groping of a 6-year-old little girl considered a wife is referred to in Islam as thigh, and again, penetration at age 9 years old. The legal right to debate Islam, upheld when they overturned the hate speech law and the Phelps ruling, is so important so that we can expose false doctrine in other religions. It is equally imperative for the Christian community to understand and grasp the magnitude of the consequences of having signed on to the UN global court system. Praise God that Obama was kept from signing the U.S. onto the UN global court system, so therefore we are not under UN law currently. It's important for Christians to get out and get politically active. That when the situation arises that we have legislators or political leaders trying to sign us on to the UN global court system, that we speak out and protest against it. Again, the UN has no constitutional civil rights such as our First Amendment. That it's a Marxist police state. And the Christian community needs to become more educated on this subject before they lose their civil rights. If anyone thinks this cannot happen in the United States, consider the recent move in one of the northern states by the Democrats to try to literally bring in an anti-blaspheming law here in the United States to mirror that in the United Nations. The Democrats do not grasp what censorship is, that once you open Pandora's box, you cannot close it. They will continue to find more and more to censor. without turning this into an 8th grade civics class. We think everyone understands this, and yet we see legislators paid on taxpayer money trying to sign away our civil rights, as if they have no grasp whatsoever of what the Constitution says about the legal right to debate the issues, that freedom of speech, the legal right to oppose other people's opinions and views, and do so publicly and privately. And just what value that holds, especially when it comes to debating other religions and exposing false religious systems. If you'll remember, we had these same debates before they overturned the hate speech law in the Phelps ruling. These same Democrats can still not grasp how important it is that we have the legal right to oppose other people's views and the state's view, and that the state has no legal right to take a viewpoint and enforce it, a state endorsement. So in closing, again, let me remind my listeners, Christians, get politically active. We have a barrage of ignorance coming at us, trying to bring in censorship. They started with the hate speech laws. It took years to get that overturned, and now they're trying to bring in an anti-blaspheming law. In closing, I'd like to leave you with this thought. The story many pastors have told of the man that brings in a giant python. He feeds the snake and pets it, keeps it warm and babies it, and the snake grows. The more he feeds it, the bigger it gets. And in the end, it gets out and constricts and kills the man. That's how we look at bringing sin into our lives. We feed it and it grows. And in the end, it brings death. We could also look through history and see how many nations that have come and gone have brought in horrible things ending in death. If you'll remember, Nazi Germany began over religious censorship laws. When they opened the concentration camps, it wasn't over gun control. It was because their all-gay Nazi brown shirt regiment in the gay identity movement in Nazi Germany got laws passed censoring any religious writings or literature that opposed the gay lifestyle. They went house to house, search and seizure, taking it up in what we called the Bible burnings. And there was so much mass arrests, they had to build concentration camps to house all of them, because the Jews and Christians would not give their Bible and Torah. And the all-gay Nazi brown shirts regiment was sent in to enforce the religious censorship laws, therefore arresting those who refused to give up their Bible and Torah, and they ended in concentration camps and mass exterminations. Again, bringing in that devil, petting it, feeding it, and letting it grow. And in the end, it comes back to bite you. That's exactly what censorship laws like the anti-blaspheming law and the now overturned hate speech law ends with. The Democratic Party has tried endlessly to bring in religious censorship, especially on the homosexual debate. When the hate speech law was overturned, they tried to ban change therapy. When the ban on change therapy was overturned in the federal Supreme Court, now they're trying other things, such as an Equality Act, where now they have a religious exemption, so even if they pass the law, we still have a legal right to debate homosexuality. So now they're back on trying to censor our legal right to debate Islam with an anti-blaspheming law. Just as the Christian activists kept pressing. We all kept pressing for the hate speech law to be overturned to protect the church's legal right to preach Romans chapter 1, the legal right to debate homosexuality, and the legal right to oppose the pro-gay agenda. We again need to get out and keep staying politically active. Keep fighting for our religious civil liberties and fighting censorship. Christians, we're in that time period that it's crucial to continue to be politically active. This has been another End Times Prophecy News Update. Carrie Geren, Scoggins. And as always, thank you for listening.